The first thing I noticed wasn't the snow. It was the quiet dot as the Greyhound bus rolled into Ottawa. I pressed my forehead to the window, expecting to feel some sort of jolt, a reminder I was in another country. But instead, everything looked normal. Target-style big-box stores, coffee chains, gas stations. But something felt different. It wasn't the buildings. It was the space between them. The air felt slower somehow, and the people didn't seem to be rushing anywhere. I stepped off the bus with 2 suitcases and the kind of nervous energy only a cross-border move can bring. The cold wrapped around me like a quiet welcome. It wasn't the aggressive, wet cold I knew from Boston. This was drier, sharper, almost polite. Snow crunched underfoot like sugar. A man in a red parka nodded at me and said, "You just get in." I nodded back, and before I could answer, he pointed toward the cab line and said, "They'll take care of you." And they did. The taxi driver asked how I was settling in. Not "Where are you going?" or "How long will this take?" Just how was I doing? Like that was normal. Like he wasn't a stranger and I wasn't a bundle of nerves trying to make this move feel like a good decision. When I got to my urban, I fumbled with the digital lock. A neighbor coming in from the sidewalk stopped without hesitation. She didn't ask if I needed help. She just said, "It's a little finicky. You have to pull the handle toward you." Then she gave me a gentle smile. Like this sort of quiet generosity was just part of how the city worked out. It hit me hardest that first evening. I went to the nearby pharmacy to grab some essentials, and I noticed a woman leave her purse in the child seat of her cart while she browsed down the aisle, not even glancing at it. Another man walked past, gently moving the cart aside to get through, barely noticing the bag at all. No one hovered. No one watched each other suspiciously. Back in the States, I'd grown up with "never leave your stuff unattended" burned into me. And here, it just wasn't like that. Later that night, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. A delivery guy on a bike rode past, no helmet, no lights, just a glowing red Canada Post bag swinging behind him. The street was quiet, but not empty. It felt lived in, calm. I realized I hadn't heard a single honk since I arrived. Not one. That was the first layer of culture shock. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a quiet, persistent whisper that said, "You're safe here. You can breathe." And for the first time in a long time, I did. It didn't take long for the everyday differences to start stacking up. Not the big things, those I had braced for. Healthcare systems, metric units, French on packaging. I'd read about all of that. No, it was the smaller rhythms of life that kept catching me off guard. The little unspoken rules no one warns you about. Like the grocery store. Back home, shopping was a strategic mission. Get in, get out, avoid the line with the slow cashier. Here in Ottawa, I found myself at the checkout awkwardly holding up the line because I didn't realize I had to bring my own bags. The cashier, a guy barely out of high school, just smiled and pointed to a bin of reusable totes. "You can borrow one and bring it back later," he said, like I was a neighbor. Not a problem. Even the way people stood in line was different. There was space between everyone. Not just physical, but emotional. No one sighed loudly. No one tapped their foot in frustration. When the person ahead of me dropped a bottle of maple syrup, 2 people stepped forward without hesitation to help pick it up. I wanted to help too, but I was still standing frozen, expecting someone to yell. At work, the differences were even sharper. I'd taken a marketing job at a mid-sized firm downtown. On my first Friday, I stayed late to finish a client deck. Around 5:30, my manager poked her head in and said, "Go home. No one's impressed by burnout here." She wasn't joking. By 6 o'clock, the office was empty. Lights off. No guilt, just balance. At weekend, I was invited to a small get-together by one of my coworkers. I showed up with a bottle of wine and my usual guarded American social reflexes: chat light, avoid politics, don't ask too many personal questions. But by the end of the night, we were talking about housing prices, family histories, and whether it's weird that Americans say bathroom when there's no bath in it. The jokes were gentle, the teasing affectionate. I found myself laughing more easily than I had in months. There was no performance, no networking, just humans being around each other. And still, some things felt strange in ways I couldn't articulate. Like how quiet the streets were on Sunday mornings. Or how people seemed completely comfortable not filling every silence. or how public transit actually worked, and more surprisingly, how people treated it with respect. Buses weren't chaotic. The driver greeted passengers. People said thank you getting off. It felt like something out of a childhood storybook, but what caught me most off guard was the way people trusted systems here. When my neighbor's elderly mother slipped on the ice, the first call wasn't a panicked scramble for an ambulance and a credit card. It was calmly dialing 911, trusting that someone would come, and that the cost wouldn't destroy them financially. I watched her recover over the next few weeks, cheered on by neighbors who shoveled her walkway and brought over soup without being asked. No GoFundMe, no drama, just community. And yet, part of me still struggled to settle in, not because Canada wasn't kind, far from it, but because I hadn't realized how much of my American identity was built on bracing for impact, on moving fast, on self-reliance, on scanning for danger. Here, there was nothing to push against, no constant friction. And that stillness, it started to change me. Slowly, I stopped clutching my phone on the bus. I started waving at my bus driver. I caught myself saying sorry when someone bumped into me. And the strangest part, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like I was learning how to be a person again, and a place that didn't expect me to prove anything. I don't know the exact moment it shifted. Maybe it was the Tuesday I stayed home sick without guilt for the first time in years. Or maybe it was when I let my guard down enough to lend my snow shovel to the teenager next door without asking for it back right away. Or maybe it was just the first time I caught myself breathing slower, walking slower without feeling like I was falling behind. That was the strangest thing of all. In America, slowing down felt dangerous. Like the world would pass you by if you weren't constantly pushing. Here in Canada, it felt like the world would wait for you. Or better yet, walk alongside you. Over time, I stopped comparing everything to back home. I started noticing the beauty in the now. The way people actually respected pedestrian crossings. How even downtown rush hour didn't feel like combat. I began to recognize neighbors by name, not because I forced it, but because we kept showing up in each other's lives in small, consistent ways. That quiet consistency started to feel more like belonging than any dramatic welcome ever could. And with that came a deeper realization. Canada hadn't just changed how I lived. It changed how I thought about living. I started seeing ambition differently. Not as a ladder to climb, but as a rhythm to align with. Here, success looked more like stability than speed. More like knowing your kids would be okay if they got sick. More like finishing work at 5 and still having time to walk your dog before dinner. More like building a life that didn't revolve around exhaustion. It made me rethink what I used to admire. Hustle, constant motion, the badge of being busy. Those things didn't seem brave anymore. They felt brittle. What I saw here, this quiet interdependence, this baseline trust, this culture of softness without weakness, it felt stronger. Still, I miss things. I miss the boldness of American expression. The wild, improvisational energy. The way strangers can become friends in line at the DMV, just because you're both frustrated. I miss being surrounded by people who believed they could change the world no matter how messy or loud that belief looked. America has a fire in its chest that Canada doesn't always burn with, but in Canada, I found air. Clean, crisp air that lets you exhale. A culture that doesn't reward burnout. A place where safety isn't a privilege, it's a baseline. Where trust isn't earned with suspicion, but extended with care. It's not perfect. No country is. But it's a place that softened something in me I didn't even know had hardened. Now, when friends back home ask what surprised me most about Canada, I don't tell them about the healthcare, or the bag policies, or even the snow. I tell them it's the way you start expecting kindness and how dangerous that once felt. How free it feels now, because the real culture shock wasn't about what I left behind. It was about what I found. And maybe that's the question Canada quietly leaves you with. What would your life look like if you stopped bracing for the worst? If you've ever felt that shift, moving, traveling, or just seeing life through a different lens, you'll know what I mean. And if you haven't yet, maybe it's closer than you think.